Hello, Chandler. I'm Councilmember Mark Stewart, and we are here on our new show, Emerging Chandler. And I'm joined by John Lewis, the former mayor of Gilbert, our wonderful sister city to the east, and also the president of the East Valley Partnership. And Micah Miranda, our economic development director for the city of Chandler. He does all things business, and he's one of the reasons that Chandler is such a great place to work. Chandler is an emerging city for innovation and technology. As a matter of fact, we're known as the community of innovation. And so what that means is that we are constantly striving to be cutting edge on delivering value to our constituents, to our residents, and to our businesses here in town. So we're going to talk today a little bit about what it means to have sort of a connection to the other cities around us. The groups like East Valley Partnership that help sort of be champions for the cities in our market. And we're going to ask a few questions of these guys and kind of talk about how those things work and why it makes Chandler and the East Valley such a great place to live, work, and play. So, John, start with you. Tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you were the mayor of Gilbert for a few years. You've got a beautiful family and now the president of the East Valley Partnership.
We moved to the East Valley in 1985.
Wow.
And we considered Chandler, Tempe, Mesa. We ended up in Gilbert. And at that time, Gilbert had 10,000 residents, but we've been here to watch this great, wonderful growth of the East Valley.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And Micah?
I'm an East Valley native, born, I guess not necessarily born here, but I grew up in Mesa from back in the early 80s. I think we moved here in 1980. So yeah, been here ever since and have watched the growth. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Yeah, I got here about almost 25 years ago, and this is definitely home. So great to have you guys on the show. Tell us a little bit about the East Valley Partnership. What you guys do. We both serve on the board of East Valley Partnership.
Yes, City of Chandler is part of the East Valley Partnership. It's a group of business and education, government, community leaders, 65 board members. It's a big board. About 100 organizations in the East Valley bring it together. It started 40 years ago, and one well-known Chandler resident was part of that, a person by the name of Eddie Basha.
Oh, yeah.
In 1982, the East Valley leaders were seeing tremendous growth in the East Valley, but we didn't have freeways, we didn't have amenities, we didn't have things that would help us with the growth. And so a group of leaders got together and said, what are we going to do about preparing for the future? And they said, we need to form a partnership. And they called it the East Valley Partnership. And so this advocacy group continues 40 years later, and economic development is a key part of that. And we work with Micah and others closely, and this East Valley is thriving.
Well, it certainly is, and it's one of the reasons that I think, we have become what I'd like to think is a global destination for not only businesses, but for families. And so, Micah, what does that mean to you when we talk about East Valley Partnership and the advocacy that they provide for our community, and how does that help economic development in Chandler?
Well, I guess at the highest level, when we're talking with companies that have the choice to go anywhere in the world, right? I mean, there's hundreds of countries. There's 20,000 cities and towns in America. And so when we're making the pitch for why Chandler, these businesses see it's not just Chandler. They have a support network in the whole Southeast Valley to draw upon. And so it really shows to these companies that we're all rowing in the same direction. So what's good for Chandler could be good for Mesa, for Queen Creek, for Tempe. So it's a very aligned and collaborative region, thanks to a lot of the leadership by the East Valley Partnership. And so it gives business confidence that, there's not going to be a lot of weird stuff taking place. And we're here to support one another and these businesses. And that really resonates with them.
No, that's so true. And you talked a little bit about just like the homeostasis of East Valley, like not being crazy, not being, off the edge. It's being focused on core competencies, right? And I think that's one of the things that East Valley Partnership does so well is advocates for the things that are important, like workforce development. That seems to be a trend right now that everybody's talking about. So can you tell us what you're seeing as it relates to workforce development trends?
Well, the partnerships with the educational institutions is key, because in looking at what the workforce needs are, working closely with the community college system, the university system, it's this team effort to say, what do we do to prepare for the future? And there are specific programs that have been developed for specific work needs now and anticipated in the future. And so that partnership is really helping the whole region.
It certainly is. We think about Chandler Unified School District, the basis school system, the community college system, and ASU, of course, and you're a U of A graduate. So we're working with those groups all the time to sort of create a conduit between the universities and the workforce. So tell us about the local trends that you're seeing in that space.
Yeah, I guess the probably the most interesting thing for me is how much support there is in workforce development. And it's always been important, but as the workforce contracts, finding efficiencies to get people to the right places is very critical. And what we're seeing now is, as John mentioned, is a lot more alignment. We are from K through 20, the school districts, the educational partners are really thinking to the future, as John pointed out, and a lot less reactive behavior and more proactive in identifying where Industry 4.0 and 5.0 will be. And, to use a sports metaphor, skating to the puck, not skating to where the puck is, but where it's going.
Well, and that's so important, right? We're communicating with the leaders at our schools, even at K through 12, right? And saying, this is what our business leaders are asking for. This is where they see the puck going in 5 to 10 years, and the schools are adjusting on the fly. So it's important, I think, for our residents to know that because we're not in those places every day. So, John, tell us about some of the big businesses that have sort of come to the East Valley recently and how that's sort of impacting the East Valley as a whole and kind of where you're seeing our growth in the future.
Okay.
Yeah.
I might, in answering that, tell you a humor story on my part that leads right into an answer, in that when we think of businesses coming here, the team effort that Micah refers to, the experience I had as mayor of Gilbert, 2009, I'm a brand new mayor, and I want to do economic development. Chandler has been doing some great things, and businesses are coming here. And so in the Greater Phoenix area is a group called the Greater Phoenix Economic Council, and they help all the communities come together and identify needs, and they find out businesses that are coming here, and they give suggestions about where they would go. So GPEC, which our communities are part of, sent out their number 2 person, at the time was Chris Camacho, who is now their leader. And he came out in 2009, my first week as mayor, and he was to teach me how to do economic development. That was my anticipation. And I'm sure when he looked at me, he said, I've got this rookie mayor, I've got to figure out how to help. But what he said was most interesting. He said, Mayor Lewis, if you really want to do economic development for Gilbert, you need to cheer on Chandler and Tempe and Mesa because they're ahead of Gilbert. And especially Chandler, he said, because you look at Intel and the thousands of employees that will be at Intel, a certain percent are going to live in Gilbert. A certain percent are going to shop in Gilbert. A certain percent are going to lead the way to have businesses that will go to Gilbert to support Intel. And so what has happened with Chandler is that they have led the way and opened up opportunities throughout the whole East Valley. And that's why I get to your question. The big announcement recently in the East Valley was LG Energy, a Korean-based company. In fact, Governor Hobbs, that was a key part of her international state of the state message that she gave just recently, where she announced LG Energy is going to expand and make it even bigger, the $5.5 billion investment in Queen Creek. Now, how did that happen? That happened because of Intel, of Chandler, and so many other a long list of businesses we could talk about, making the East Valley a place where businesses want to come. Gulfstream would be an example. They're at the Gateway Airport, but for so many reasons, all that has happened in the East Valley, with Chandler being a key part of that, have led the way for companies like that to come. And Gulfstream is a big name in the aircraft industry, and they are putting a service center right here in the East Valley. As another example, Chandler has led the way to provide labor, skilled workforce, and other things happening that have occurred because of things that have happened here in Chandler.
Well, I want you to keep going. Great things about Chandler. We can feel it here, right? We can feel the economic impact within our community. But I think, we stand on the shoulders of giants that came before us, right? In that central planning, we think about J. Tibshirani, we think about Mayor Brooks, and folks like that who carved out employment corridors, right? And for Chandler to be a community of innovation, we have held on to those. I think it's one of the first things that happened when I came as my first day on city council was like, okay, hold on. We have Price Corridor. It's there for a reason. And so tell us why that matters to you as an economic development director.
Preserving land for employment in high residential growth areas is critical. Arizona historically has been a residential wonderland. You can build houses and apartments, and it's great quality of life. People want to be here. However, but if you don't preserve the land needed to have employment, you jeopardize your economic stability in the long run. So Chandler made a very conscious and dedicated effort to preserve our employment corridors, which are West Chandler, Price Corridor, downtown, uptown Chandler, in the Air Park area. And economic development, we vigorously protect these areas from residential encroachment, because once that land is gone, it is gone forever. And we lose the opportunity to then compete for the next project. And as we approach build out, the amount of raw land we have for economic development shrinks. And so we are very committed to preserving the legacy that you spoke of into the future. So we will have employment opportunities for our children, our grandchildren to stay here.
No, that's great.
I think I'm going to add to that. Chandler is known for government and business, education, community leaders working together. I saw what you just described, that Price Corridor, late 80s. The home developers wanting to build houses, there was intense pressure on Chandler, and yet there was a vision that leaders had put together of what the entire community would look like, of where businesses would be and homes and other services. And it was something that with that vision, the leaders were able to attach to and hang on to, and to then build for the future. And that Price Corridor was just a magnificent example of leaders planning for the future and then sticking to what their vision was so that we could have today what we have.
You're certainly right. I mean, it's cliche to say live, work, play. I feel like I've been saying that for the 6 years that I've been here, but Chandler, Gilbert, East Valley, Tempe is truly a live, work, play community because of that vision and holding on to those employment corridors. But, let's talk a little bit about like what's happening right now, like who's showing up. Like you talked a little bit about LG. What's happening in Chandler? You had some big wins recently.
Yeah, there's been a lot of great activity. And so obviously the big one is Intel announcing their Fab 5262, $20 billion capital investment, 3,000 net new jobs. And it's not just the investment from Intel, it's the indirect and induced impact. So Intel alone has about 15,000 employees, but to John's point earlier, they're also responsible for another 50,000 jobs.
Well, small business
in Arizona. And it's everything from your florist to your CPA to your graphic designer. So the economic impact is huge. And we're seeing that all the way down the semiconductor supply chain now. So Yield Engineering Solutions going into Price Corridor, Edwards Vacuum, 217,000 square foot advanced manufacturing facility. Viave relocated their corporate headquarters from the Bay Area, and they're going to have an office on Price Corridor and then a manufacturing facility in the Air Park area. The list keeps going. We've been very fortunate, and but to win those, like we talked about, you got to have places for them. And so, my saying is product wins projects, right? And so part of what we do to stay in front of those projects so we can have the opportunity to compete with them is work with our development community. What are we seeing in terms of trends? Working with their brokers to make sure the buildings that we do have in the pipeline can get in front of these prospects. And that's really where we spend a lot of time. So, to have the ribbon cutting, there's years worth of work that goes into it. And a couple weeks ago, we had a soft ribbon cutting for Shields at the Chandler Mall. Obviously not in the advanced manufacturing space, but the CEO said, this has been a 5-year project. And he mentioned the first communication we had. He's like, I pulled up my email from Micah 5 years ago, and they're still under construction. So these things take a long time. And it goes back to having that vision. What do we want to be in the future? And Chandler in the Southeast Valley has a pretty clear vision where we want to go.
And I add to the city council, to Micah and the economic development team, appreciation because it's a lot of work. Uh, we have in Arizona the Arizona Commerce Authority and then GPEC that we mentioned, but economic development really happens at the local level. When opportunities are identified, it was planning for where those businesses could potentially come and redevelopment opportunities. And then it's Micah and team identifying, well, do they have water needs? Do they have utility needs? This or that, or back to workforce we talked about. There's a long list of things that have to be addressed in a competitive way because that company could go lots of places in the United States. And they're picking Chandler because of team effort and just identifying ways to make sure that a business can thrive here.
Yeah, certainly. I agree. It's like, I just learned the other day that it's 6 years later. I learned the other day that we have water allocated for each parcel that we have in the city of Chandler. Well, that shows stability to a possible business owner that's coming to town that says, hey, you know what, that particular plot of land or that particular building that we're looking at can sustain what I need in order to grow in the future and things like that. And then you talked about stability. That's so important. So like if you were to put just a bow on sort of this conversation and say, okay, what's the East Valley Partnership going to continue to do and how's that going to fit within your plan? Maybe you start first, John, and tell us what you see in the future.
We're going to continue to market the East Valley and Chandler best we can. and it's pretty easy. We do have a profile that we prepare every year with the help of the cities in the East Valley, and we send that all over the country. And it's something that can be used if a company is interested in finding out more about the area. Typically, a company coming to Arizona is going to look at the state, and then Greater Phoenix, and then the region, East Valley, and then they get into the details of Chandler and other specific cities. And so it's all of us working together to do that marketing. And so we'll continue to do so. And as a tribute and as a compliment to Chandler, Chandler's an easy sell. It sells really well.
Well, that's good to hear. Mike, what are your thoughts?
I think from Chandler's perspective, at the staff level, we really execute against the vision of mayor and council spelled out in the strategic framework plan. And mayor and council have given us pretty clear direction on where they want us to be and where they want us to go, which is good jobs, good community partners in our companies, and higher education. So that's been a major push from council over the past few years, is continue to engage with higher education partners to grow that workforce. So GCU recently announced they're launching a new nursing program here in Chandler, which we're excited to welcome. We all know about the challenges in that area, but between ASU, U of A, GCU, Chandler Gilbert Community College, really leaning into continuing to support and drive, the workforce of the future.
Well, it's working. Whatever y'all are doing is working. I am just so proud of the work that's being done in East Valley and in Chandler. And I know that when I'm out and about at the grocery store and people are excited about what we're doing here, and then we hear bad news all the time, but there's a lot of good news coming out of the East Valley. There's a lot of good news coming out of Chandler. So I'm just grateful, John Lewis, for joining us, and Micah Miranda for joining me as well. I mean, what you guys are doing, what the entire community is doing to create opportunity for our residents is absolutely amazing. And so with their work, with our work, with your council's work, we'll continue to create the type of community that really lives up to the name Community of Innovation. So thanks so much for being with us today, and have a great day.